In this tutorial, we'll take a look at the various modules in JobPro and how they all work together. The JobPro includes a lot of functionality suitable for individuals or for small, medium and large organizations. With a large number of modules, we've given the ability to turn off and on modules either at an overall global level or at a user level. And you can also close and open module groups as well. If you've got a larger size screen, then you can open up the JobPro window to fit all the modules up at the top. But in this example, we're just using a small screen, so we can use the groupings then to view all the modules. So looking across at the modules, we've got a companies module where you'll have customers, suppliers, various companies and organizations you deal with. A contacts module, including all your employees and customers as well, if you sell directly to contacts, and any other contacts that are either linked to companies or just general contacts on their own. Then we've got a communications module. So anywhere in the system that you create, for example, phone calls, SMS messages, send emails, letters, faxes, or internal messages to other JobPro users, and generally notes as well. All of the type of communications then will be consolidated in communications but viewed from different places in the system. We've got a full document management module with the ability from various places like a customer screen or a job screen, other places in the system, to link to documents or add documents to those areas. Then we've got a full jobs and projects module. We've got a tasks module, and the tasks module can be linked into other areas like breaking a job down into tasks or following up tasks for sales inquiries. And we also have a time log module where you can track time against jobs and tasks. And then on the sales side, we've got sales inquiries or leads, quotations, sales orders, sales accounts, so you can go into one place to find anybody that owes you money, sales invoices, receipts, and on the inventory side, we've got products and services module. We've got multiple locations for those companies that need to track multiple stock locations in the system, or maybe they rent out locations like rooms as well. You can use the locations module for those areas. There's a units or assets module, so any items that you sell that's tracked by serial number, or any items like assets that you need to track internally for your own use, whether you're using it within your organization or using assets for jobs, for rental use for example, but also tracking customer assets that you might have sold equipment or items to customers. You can then track those customer assets at a serial number level. So, for example, you could do service and repair jobs on them. There's also a batches module that ties together with serial numbers. So you can track serialized items by batches. So whether you're purchasing them on purchase orders and you want to assign a batch number to those items, or you're assembling or manufacturing goods, you can also assign batches to those areas as well. Then we've got a purchase order module and also a shipping module. So lots of modules and functionality to suit every type of organization or individual. But if you don't need to use certain modules, you can turn off those in setup, and they can be turned off at an access level for each individual as well. So JobPro also has a calendar module, a dashboard where you can see all outstanding areas of the system like jobs, tasks, current quotations, etc. And it also has alerts related functionality. So if you want to get alerts relating to tasks that need to be done or just messages from other internal users, we have an alerts module as well. But how do all these modules fit together, and what way should the data flow throughout each and from module to module? Workflow in JobPro is very flexible, as every company can work differently. For example, an invoice could be created from a quote, a job, a sales order, whether it's a full invoice or a part invoice from a sales order, or from a shipping record, or simply from the customer record as well. So there's lots of ways of doing something similar. It's just a matter of you knowing what to do and you'll then know the quickest way to do the relevant task that you want. So you'll quickly use your own method for moving data from one end of the system to the other. And it could not be simpler with an easy to use, intuitive user interface. So let's start off at the beginning with an example, and we'll create a sales lead or a sales inquiry. So go into the inquiries module, create a new record, and from within here, if this inquiry is someone we haven't dealt with before, we can manually type in their details. Company name if relevant, contact name, various contact information. Or if it's a company or a customer that we have dealt with before, we can simply link them to this inquiry here by clicking on the button and selecting from a company, or if it's an individual, just selecting an individual. Now each module has a separate video tutorial, so we don't need to go into a lot of detail for each area. I just want to give an example of how the flow of data moves between each module to each module. So for example, here we have the inquiry. We can fill in more details if we like, and on the general tab we can specify what they're interested in. We can log any communications relating to this inquiry, like we could create a phone call from here, for example, create an SMS message, create a letter or fax, or also just create a note in relation to this inquiry. And if we make a phone call, which we can use Skype or another system using VoIP software called Asterix, we can set up that when you create a call, it creates a log of that call in your communication section, and also, if you like, it can open the log on screen so that you can type in some comments or information relating to that call. You can also send messages to internal users here as well. So this communications functionality you'll see throughout the system. In this case, it's relating to this inquiry. So let's create a quote from this inquiry. So we click on the Quotes tab, click the plus button, and we're brought into the Inquiries module with the details entered in at the top. We'll add some products or services in here. Specify a quantity. In the case of an item that's tracked in stock and potentially tracked by serial numbers, we can specify the location if we have multiple locations in the system from a stock point of view, or also we could be entering in services here as well. So you can manually type in a description, or you could click in and select a service from the products module. So let's say 4 hours for that. From a stock point of view, we've got a little stock view here. We can see quantities available for a particular item. In this case, it looks like we need to create a purchase order because we're short, although there are purchase orders on the system, so we can check and see when they might arrive in. So if we go back to the inquiry, we can see the quotation on that inquiry here. And if needed, we can create multiple quotations from here. So for example, we could go to the quote. The customer might need to add something to the quotation. So one option you have is to click duplicate quotation on the options tab, and we'll create a new revision. So that'll set the original quotation to amended and the new quotation to in progress. And let's add another item to that quote. Manually put in some text. And then if we go back to the sales inquiry, we can see the history of the quotes relating to this inquiry and potentially then the approved one. So also from the inquiry screen, we can create tasks like follow-up tasks to remind you to maybe follow up on the quote or do a call out. So what we're looking at here is how all these modules knit together. On a sales inquiry, we're using quotes, we're using tasks to follow up. So let's put in a quick task. And then we could also, for example, we can set the different task types and set up what we'd like here. We can put a date and a start time and a finish time. And we can also set a reminder for ourselves. So we'll get a pop-up reminder when we need to follow up in relation to this inquiry. So to link back to the inquiry, the easiest way is to click on the word inquiry here. So throughout each of the modules in the system, you'll see various ways of navigating between modules, whether it's just using the top menu or using these links between modules. Like we can go to the inquiry, we can click here to go to this contact in the contacts module. If this task was linked to a job, we could click on this link to go to the job. The same to go to a stage that's linked to the job. So everywhere you see an underlined text, that means you can link to another part of the system. So if we go back into the inquiry, it gives us the option to go to either the company record or the inquiry record. Then you can see the task relating to that inquiry. We've also got a documents tab where you can then add linked documents to this inquiry. That uses the documents module here, where if you link a document to an inquiry, now you can link documents to various places in the system like jobs, tasks, companies and contact records, product records, etc. But you have the ability to click and link to an existing document or to a new document. So if we selected an existing document, for example, and pick a PDF that's already in the system used somewhere else, if we view that PDF, we can actually see here in the documents module the PDF itself, where we can interact with that PDF, but we can also see where that document has been used. Like it's linked to an inquiry, it's linked to a task as well, it's linked to other places in the system, including used as an attachment on an email. So let's go back to the inquiry screen. So that's a quick overview of the inquiry module and how it links in with other modules in the system. So let's go into the quotation that we created there for this inquiry, and we'll follow the flow through of the data throughout this inquiry, turning it into a customer, creating a job from the quote, and so on. So let's now go into the in progress quotation. And let's say the customer wants to go ahead with this. What we can do here is we have an option of creating a job from the quotation. Now, if this inquiry was to a new contact or company that we haven't dealt with before, well then on attempting to create a job, you have the option then of auto entering that company and contact as a new customer in the system, so that the new customer in the companies and contacts module will be linked to the new job that's created from the quote. So if we click on create job from here, we can set the status of the quotation to approved. And now we're brought into the jobs module, linked to that company, and we can see in the quotes tab for the job the original quote that created this record. We can navigate back to the quote by clicking on the arrow. So let's enter in a job name. And we could put in a finish date as well, a job type, another contact information that would usually come from the customer record, but you can also enter it in here. Maybe a PO number for the customer. We also have the ability on a job to do various things, like book in resources on the job, people, assets that you might want to use or rent out or loan on the job, locations that you might want to use on the job, like meeting rooms, or rental locations like studios. So a resource can be any of those three different areas in Job Pro. You can also break down a job into stages, and each stage or job can be broken down into multiple tasks. You can log time on a job. You can set up budgeted employee time as well. So you could budget time based on the employee type, like for example a designer or someone in production, and you can then, based on the actual hours being incurred on the job, get a variance or a balance left in the budget. On the job as well, we can see any quotes. We can break down a job into budgets using the category functionality. Now all this type of functionality is covered in separate video tutorials, so I'm going to glance over it very quickly here, but it just gives you a good idea of how the modules interact with each other. Most of these tabs here relate to other modules in the system, like the cost tab, where you can see purchase orders relating to this job and where you can create purchase orders from here as well. An expenses section here where you can log expenses like parts or labor or anything that you're incurring, consumable items on this job can be logged in here. But expenses can also be logged on tasks or time logs that are also linked to this job. And they'll also all filter back in here, and then you'll see your overall job totals, your costs versus your sales, giving you your profit and margin on the right hand side. So we can also see any sales orders related to a job, any shipping records if you ship out goods and products, any sales invoices linked to this job where you can create invoices and also create invoices from chargeable or billable costs that you've incurred on the job, print statements relating to invoices owed for this customer, and also assembly or manufacturing related functionality where if you manufacture or assemble finished products, you can specify in the products module what makes up those finished items, and in here you can create a job assembly to assemble or put together those finished items, where it'll increase the stock for the finished items and decrease the stock for the raw materials or components that made up those finished items. Again, all this is covered in separate individual video tutorials. You've got your documents management functionality in the jobs module and various other information as well, like grouping jobs together. But let's focus on the flow of information throughout these modules. So we created this job from a sales order, or from a quotation, let's say. If we go back to that quotation, we can then push on this information to other modules as well. So usually what you'd want to do is create a sales order from a quotation. Now the use of the sales orders module is that, well, first of all, it can be a place where you can get a signed sales order from your customer or your client for the goods or services that you're going to be selling to them. But also the sales order module is ideal for part invoicing and shipping or fully invoicing and shipping. So for tracking sales of products or services, but also distributing or shipping those items out as well, it can all stem from your sales orders module. So let's create a sales order from this quote. There are other areas that we're not going to look at in relation to the quotations module because they're covered in other video tutorials. So let's create the sales order here. So now we're looking at the sales order screen. Linked to the customer. It's linked to the job because the quotation was linked to the job. We could have a different shipping address, which if we liked we could have entered on the quote, and that would have flowed through the sales order and through to the sales invoices and shipping records. Then on the line item section of the sales order, we can see again a stock view if it's related to stock. If we're short on stock, for example, and need to create purchase orders. But from the sales order, we can then either part or fully ship or invoice or both at the same time. So this is where the flow of information from module to module happens, and sales orders pushes the next level of the data onto either shipping or invoicing, or you can create both at the same time. So one way of doing that is literally to click into the shipping and invoice tab, and you can create a part invoice and ship, or create a full invoice, or you could do a full shipment from here as well. So let's just do a part invoice and ship. You have the option on this screen of specifying the quantities that you want to do. So let's say a quantity of 1 of this item, a quantity of 3 of that item, and then we'll put a quantity of 1 for that description there, and we'll create both an invoice and a shipment record. Click continue, and because one of these items is tracked by serial numbers, we need to specify which unit or serial number we're actually picking. So let's just pick the second one here and click continue. So now we can see on the sales order that it's created the invoice and the shipping record, and we can click an arrow to go to either of those, print off or email the invoice for example. And we can also see from this invoice that it has been shipped because it was shipped from the sales order. So we can view the shipping record from here, or we can actually go back to the sales order from here as well. So again, you have this number of ways of navigating around the system. We can go to the job, to the contact, to the company. We can view the invoice address by clicking on that and see it in Google Maps. So if we click on view here, we'll be brought into the shipping record that was also created from the sales order. And that shipping record is also complete. So the stock for this particular item has now reduced by a quantity of 1. So we can go back to the sales order from here. And if we look at the line entry section of the sales order, we can see that there's still a balance of 1 of these items remaining to be shipped and invoiced. So in this case, it's a little bit unusual because we have a mixture of both services and products. But essentially you can still do a shipping for one of those items and not the other. But in this example, we're just giving you an idea of all of the options available. So let's go and finish off the sales order by doing another part invoice and ship for the balances remaining. We click continue, and then we need to specify the item that's tracked by serial number. So it's saying that the sales order is now fully shipped and invoiced. Would you like to set the status to complete? So we click yes. And it's saying then that the sales invoice and shipping record have been created and are displayed in these tabs. So now we've got no balances left on the sales order. You can also do back orders reports in the sales order option screen, both from an invoicing and a shipping point of view. So this is ideal if you want to see from your sales orders module what items are left to be invoiced or shipped in the system. So it's a little bit like a work in progress type report. What's on the system at the moment, both from a financial point of view and from a shipping point of view. Now we could also, from a sales order or from a quote or from various parts of the system, create purchase orders. So let's create a purchase order from here just to give you an example. So we'll create a purchase order for this particular item. And it's saying, would you like to use the minimum order quantity for the supplier of 5 or use the quantity of 2 from this sales order? So we'll say the minimum order quantity, because the current supplier for that item must have specified that you can only order this item in quantities of 5. So those types of settings you can enter in the products module. We'll have a look at that shortly. So now we've created the purchase order from the sales order. And in here, there's a number of ways of tracking this. We could, for example, set this to a drop ship PO. So in other words, we can drop ship and tell the supplier to ship directly to our customer. So when you go to turn this on, it's giving us a message say that this PO is created from a sales order. So setting it to be a drop ship will auto update the shipped quantity column on the sales order when it's shipped or received from the PO. Now, we'll actually cancel this because we'll just do a standard PO here. But I just thought it'd be worth showing you how you can do a drop ship from purchase orders, and where you can actually track the shipping of that drop ship, where you can use tracking related functionality like from DHL, where you can link into their website, auto putting in the tracking number for that shipping to view the status of that shipping. So in this case, let's just treat this as a standard PO, where we're going to receive these goods into our own stock. And we've specified here automatically that it's coming into the main stock location. So when we've set up our identities, which some companies will only have one identity, their company itself, but other companies might have multi-stores or multi-departments or offices within the one organization that's using the one JobPro system. So for an identity and setup, you can actually specify, if you've got multiple stock locations, a default location in and a default location out per identity. So in this case, the default location in for this organization or this identity is the main stock location. Now you can see here we've other sample stock locations in the system. So when we receive goods here, they'll be received into that location. Now you can track the shipping of this item in advance, and that will create a shipping record where, as mentioned, you can use carrier related functionality like for DHL to track where and what the status is for those shipping. So if we were to do that, we can click into the shipped column and we can put in, say, a quantity of 3. So let's say the supplier is sending out 3 of these items first. Click OK, and that will have created a shipping record. And there's a balance of 2 remaining to be shipped. So to view that shipping record, we can click the shipping tab in the PO screen and click on the arrow to view that shipping record. So here we see the actual shipping of the quantity of 3 of those items. And on the tracking tab in here, we can specify that UPS is the carrier, and we can put in the tracking number here if we had one. And then if we want to view the full screen for the website for UPS, we can click on a little icon, and if you've got a larger monitor, you can open up the size of the JobPro window to view the full web page for that actual carrier. So there's more information relating to this tracking related functionality included in separate video tutorials for both the shipping module and for just tracking shipping in general. So let's set the status of the shipping record to complete. And that's going to generate a stock movement. So because this item is tracked by serial numbers, we're prompted to specify the serial numbers. And for this particular product, we have specified to let the system auto-generate the serial numbers. Now, in a lot of cases, you'll probably want to enter in the serial number from the products themselves, and you can do that using a barcode scanner. But in this case, we're just going to quickly generate those serial numbers. So that will have introduced 3 of those items into stock using automatically generated serial numbers. If we print this document, you can actually include the serial numbers on the document as well. So this is useful if you're doing a shipping out record, say shipping to your customer, and you want to include the serial numbers on the actual shipping document. So we can quickly go back to the purchase order by clicking on the link here. And back on the PO screen, we can see that 3 have been shipped, there's a balance of 2, and the same from a receiving point of view, there's a balance of 2 remaining. So let's complete this purchase order by receiving the balance, which will actually create a shipping in record as well. So for any users of the system that don't necessarily need to track the shipping, if they just set the PO to be received, it auto creates a shipping record in the background and doesn't require the user to go in and do that. So you have both options in relation to receiving items on purchase orders. So if we simply set the status of this purchase order to received, it'll say that this purchase order is balanced to be received and serial numbers need to be entered. So it only gives you this message if there's an item or items that are tracked by serial number on the PO. So we click continue, and then we can generate automatically the 2 items that are being received. So now this purchase order is complete. There's no balances left, and we can see the 2 shipping records have been created. One we created in advance to track the shipping, and the other one was created automatically. So that gives you a good idea how the flow of goods and services can happen from quotes to sales orders, and from sales orders then to shipping and invoicing, or creating a PO from a sales order in this case, but you could create a PO from just about anywhere, and then tracking the shipping of that PO using the shipping module. And you can also do a return from a PO as well. So for example, if one of these items was faulty, we could click on return, we could specify a quantity of 1, we could then select the serial number that's faulty of the item, click continue, and then that item will have been returned with a shipping record auto-created. So in this case, it's a shipping out record and it's flagged as a return. And you can go in here and print off that document that you want to send back to your supplier. And automatically the document title is a supplier return. And you've control over what you want to call the different document types in relation to shipping, whether it's a shipping note or a customer return if a return was coming in from a customer, for example, or in this case a supplier return. So if we take a look at the jobs module, because all of these transactions we've been created all stemmed from a quotation that was originally linked to the job, and subsequently everything else is also linked to the job. So let's have a look at that job. And if we look at the tabs, we'll see the original quote. We'll see the purchase order that's been created. We can see the sales order that was created from the quote. And we can see the relevant shipping records that have also been created in relation to the different transactions in this example video tutorial. We can then see the invoices that have been created from the sales order. So that gives you a good idea of how all these modules tie together. It's also worth having a look at the jobs module in a little bit more detail. For example, if we've logged some costs on jobs, let's put in a couple of costs here. Now a cost can be absolutely anything. It could be consumable items, it could be stock items that when you incur them as costs on a job, they'll then deduct from stock. Or it could be just anything typed in with a description. And you have the ability from a job to create an invoice from costs. So you could have logged different types of costs on a job, including resources. So for example, we might have rented out an office or a location, or an asset might be used on a job. And any of these areas you can specify default charge out rates per hour or per day or per booking. So for example here, we could say the per hour rate, and we could put in a sell price and a quantity. And then when we return back, we can go into invoices and we can create an invoice from these billable costs, including time logs as well, if we have any time logs entered in the system. So on this screen here, various modules are tied together, cost related areas from the job, where you can create an invoice for all of these items that are linked to the job. Also mentioned earlier, you can break down a job into stages and tasks. So you can see how the tasks module ties into various modules, like following up on a sales inquiry, entering in tasks for a job, or just generally using tasks for absolutely anything, like a reminder to do the month-end accounts, or tasks linked to, for example, a contact or a customer. And we can also log then time against the job, either from this screen, where we can click on the plus button, select the contact, put in the time, like a start and finish time, or just an enter time. Or we can log time on a timesheet, like on the home screen quick view area, where we can click on the little quick view arrow, And in here we can then log time for this person throughout the day, or click on a job or click on a task down here to auto create a time log up above linked to those areas in the system. You can also log time in the calendar as well on the time log tab. So multiple places that we can actually log time, but including the jobs module where you can log time directly at a job by job level. So there's quite a number of the modules in the system that actually tie into the jobs module. Jobs is very much a central part of the system that ties everything together. If we have a quick look at, for example, the inventory related modules like products, multiple locations if you need to use them, units or assets and batches. Now if you don't use any of these modules or need them, you can turn them off in setup, so it'll simplify the top modules menu and make it smaller as well. Purchase orders and shipping relating to inventory, they also are linked into and appear at the jobs level as well. So there's full video tutorials on all of these separate modules, and there's no need for me to really go into and look at those now, because the purpose of this tutorial is just to look at the flow of information throughout the system. So let's take a look at one of the invoices that we created for this job. So here's the sales invoice. If we receive a payment or a receipt from the customer, we can enter that receipt in a few ways. We could simply flag this invoice has been paid by clicking on the little tick here, which auto pays the invoice, setting it to paid, and automatically creates a receipt in the receipts module. Or alternatively, we can create a receipt from here. Or if, for example, the customer paid for more than one invoice, well then it might be easier to literally go into the receipts module itself, create a new receipt, link it to the customer, and then for the amount that they've paid, we can part allocate against multiple outstanding. So let's say, for example, they paid for this invoice here, and we'll say yes, fully pay that, and that's now disappeared from the list. So we have our unallocated amount left, and then we can allocate that against a few other invoices to mark those off until the allocation is completely cleared. And also from a purchasing or inventory point of view, let's have a look at the purchase order that we created. So the flip side of receipts are payments, and we can log here supplier invoices that have been received linked to this order. So create a purchase invoice for the full order balance. So let's say yes, that we received a purchase invoice in for the full amount. We can also then flag that as paid as well, and whether it was approved for payment and by who. And we can put in the supplier invoice number. So that should give you a good idea of the flow of information throughout the system and how all the different modules interact together. From a financial point of view, the sales account pulls everything together, because in JobPro, a customer could be a company or an organization, or it could be an individual in the context module. So instead of having to go into each of those modules separately to see who owes you money, you do that in sales accounts. So sales accounts are generated automatically. As soon as you invoice a customer, well then that auto creates a sales account. So in here then you can do a search for any account that's outstanding, print statements, and so on. Another module that's worth having a look at is the comms module. Now, the comms module stores logs of any communications like emails that are outgoing, letters, faxes, SMS messages, internal messages between JobPro users, or just general notes. You can also create mail shots for contacts or sales leads, so like a mass emailer blast or a mail merge, for letters, faxes, emails and SMS messages. So the comms module is actually accessed from various parts of the system. Anywhere you see, for example, the communications and notes portal, that all ties into the comms module here. So for a particular customer in this case, we can see any communications linked to them, or it might be from a job record. We want to see any communications relating to a job. Or alternatively, we can go into the comms module and create a new communication type from here, which can be an email, letter, fax, a note, an SMS message, or an internal message to another Job Pro user. So without getting into too much detail on each module, that gives you a good idea of how all the modules interact together and how the data flows between them. And also, a few other options or modules worth having a quick look at is the calendar, where for a day, week or a month you can look at tabs like resources, where you can view different types of resources together and see their availability for a given day, for example. You can view any jobs that are on at the moment, any stages for jobs, any tasks linked to, well, jobs, for example, or anything else in the system. You can move around tasks, switch them between days, change the duration. Also in the calendar you've got the time log tab, where you can look at time logs for a given month, week or day. And on the day view you can actually enter in the time logs as well, just like on the quick view screen. And then also the comms tab in the calendar, where you can get a quick look at any communications within the system for any given month, week or day, filtering out by different people, for example, or different types of communications. And there's also the dashboard module, which gives you a quick overview of anything that's outstanding in the system, like current inquiries, jobs that haven't been started or are in progress, tasks that are outstanding, quotations that are current, sales orders, purchase orders, shipping out records or shipping in records, and sales invoices. So this is a quick way to get to just about anywhere in the system. A little bit like the quick view area on the home screen, where you can look at all of this type of outstanding information. And there's also the alerts functionality, where you can get an alert for reminders to do with tasks and also messages from other internal users. So I hope that gives you a good overview of the full Job Pro system and how it all knits together. And if you need any more information in relation to any of these modules or functionality, have a look at all the other video tutorials as well available on the website.